I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Yep.
I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged through the streets. But there are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click, our guts are usually right. So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that's an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes.
Wow.
6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is.
Yep.
And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools of decoupling to do? Because Jewish donors have been the #1 funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened? And it's not just the colleges. It's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. It's like, time for you guys to wake up and say no more. Draw a line in the sand. I don't care if you hate me. We put them in power. We displaced the Shah. We displaced the democratically elected leader Mossadegh and put in the Shah, which then, of course, led to the Ayatollahs of Iran. And then finally, is a nuclear weapon against Iran a threat to America? Probably. Could be. A threat to Israel, but is it a threat to America? I mean, India has nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. So is it worth a potential another war with Iran? And the people that are, let's just say, advocates for preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon by all means necessary, they're the same architects that were perfectly fine with the Iraq War, the same designers of the Iraq War. The primary way Iran can hurt this country is by sucking us into another Middle East quagmire, and they know it. And Iran would have the potential to be the worst Middle East quagmire of all time. Iran has 90 million people. That's more than 3 times as big as Iraq was when we invaded 22 years ago. It's larger than both Afghanistan and Iraq combined, both in population and in area. Iraq was at least mostly a flat country. It's a bunch of cities along a couple rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Iran isn't like that. It's almost all mountains. Iran has spent decades preparing specifically for war with the United States. Their military has lots of weapons designed for fighting a much stronger adversary. They have a lot of drones, a lot of speedboats, a lot of cheap, expendable weapons. They're far more formidable than Iraq or the Taliban were. And I seriously want your thoughts. Email me, freedom@charliekirk.com. Would you say it's a good idea to use military force to strike potential Iranian nuclear targets? My whole life, I've been told that Iran is getting a bomb. Iran is getting a bomb. Iran is getting a bomb. Iran is getting a nuclear bomb. And yet here in 2025, they do not have a nuclear bomb. So why should we trust the American intelligence without verifying it? Of hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. Now, I don't like generalizations. Not every Jewish person believes that. But it is true the Anti-Defamation League was part and parcel with Black Lives Matter. It is true that some of the largest financiers of left-wing anti-white causes have been Jewish Americans. They went all in on woke, and it wasn't just ADL. It was some of the top Jewish organizations in the country that have done that. In fact, we have seen this with the recent retreat of Jewish donations that are no longer going to be administered to colleges, right? Mark Rowan, Leon Kaufman. Can we get that full list? It's very powerful. The part of so that's totally true. And by the way, Tucker Carlson reinforces this. So I'm going to it was quite a day on the internet. Tucker Carlson was interviewing Candace Owens. We have Candace Owens coming up next hour. And Tucker Carlson mentions that Jewish Americans have primarily been financing cultural Marxist ideas. We said this, by the way, last week, and people came after us. We actually said it in a different way. We said, I'm glad that Jewish Americans are reconsidering their financing of cultural Marxism. And people misunderstood it intentionally and slandered us as being anti-Semites. But listen to this. Tucker Carlson is completely correct by saying this, that the philosophical foundation of anti-whiteness has been largely financed by Jewish donors in the country.